The wind howled like a dying animal over the frozen plains of Wyoming. Snow slashed through the dark like shards of glass, and the world was nothing but white and wind and silence, until that scream cut through it. It wasn't human. It was raw, ragged, the kind of cry that made the hair rise on the back of your neck. Somewhere out there, beyond the fence line, something was fighting for its life. Inside a small farmhouse, a lantern flickered in the window. Jacob Miles, a grizzled farmer with a weathered face and eyes dulled by years of solitude, looked up from his wood stove. He froze. The sound came again, closer this time. A high, guttural yowl that bled through the wind. He grabbed his coat and flashlight, muttering to the old hound sleeping by the fire. "Stay, Rusty. Not your kind of trouble." Outside, the storm swallowed him whole. Snow whipped at his face. His breath came out in clouds. He followed the sound, past the barn, through the skeletal pines, boots crunching over ice. Then he saw it. Under the half-buried line of traps set by poachers, a bobcat writhed in agony. Its front leg was caught in a rusted steel trap, blood soaking the snow beneath it. Its eyes, golden and furious, locked on Jacob's flashlight. It hissed, a feral growl that vibrated through the storm. Jacob's chest tightened. The animal was magnificent even in pain, muscles coiled, spotted fur rippling under the cold. It bared its teeth, daring him to come closer. He knelt a few feet away, voice low and steady. "Easy now. I ain't here to hurt you." The bobcat's body trembled violently. The trap chain clanked with every jerk. Jacob could see where the metal had cut deep into the flesh. It wouldn't survive the night if he walked away. He pulled off his glove, reached for the spring mechanism with bare, shaking fingers. The steel burned cold against his skin. The bobcat lunged, missed him by inches. He didn't flinch. "Damn fool," he muttered under his breath. "You're just scared." With a grunt, he forced the jaws of the trap open. The metal snapped back with a sharp clang, and the bobcat stumbled free, collapsing into the snow. Its breath came fast, misting in the air. For a heartbeat their eyes met, human and wild. Then, with a burst of strength, the creature leapt up and slashed across his forearm. Blood spattered the snow. Jacob fell backward, clutching his arm as the bobcat bolted into the storm, vanishing into the trees like smoke. For a long moment, Jacob sat there, snow melting into his hair, blood dripping through his glove. He looked toward the dark woods, chest heaving. "Go on, then," he whispered, half to himself. "Be free." The wind answered with a howl that sounded almost like laughter. Behind him, the trap lay open and empty, its jaws still trembling from the force. Jacob turned toward home, the snow swallowing his footprints one by one. He didn't know it yet, but that night's act of mercy would ripple through his quiet valley. And before long, everyone in the village would whisper the same thing. The bobcat had come back. By morning, the storm had eased. The sky hung heavy with gray clouds, and the snow lay deep and untouched, except for one set of tracks leading from the woods to Jacob's fence. Jacob stepped onto the porch, his arm wrapped in a rough bandage. The cut still burned beneath the fabric. Rusty, the old hound, sniffed the air and growled low. His fur stood on end. Jacob followed his gaze. There, along the fence line, were bobcat tracks, clear as day. They circled the barn, crossed the pasture, then vanished into the tree line again. Strange thing was, there wasn't just one set. There were two. He frowned. Couldn't be. he muttered. "Ain't no pair that close to human land." Inside the barn, something had changed. The goats were restless, eyes wide, stamping nervously. One of the hens lay dead near the hay bales, throat cleanly torn, no other mark. Jacob crouched beside it, brow furrowed. A precise kill. Not a coyote, not a stray dog. Rusty barked again, deep and sharp, staring toward the woods. For a second, Jacob thought he saw movement among the trees. A flash of tawny fur. Gone as quick as it came. His breath caught. "No," he whispered. "You wouldn't come back." By midday, word had spread. Old Mrs. Lang from the next property came by in her truck, scarf wrapped around her face. "You hear what happened to the Turner boys' calf last night?" she asked, stepping out with a thermos in hand. Jacob shook his head. "Found it half-eaten, blood everywhere. Hunter says it was a bobcat. Big one." He felt a cold weight settle in his chest. "Could be wolves." Mrs. Lang snorted. "Ain't been wolves here in 15 years. She looked at his arm, where blood had seeped through the bandage. "You sure you didn't bring something back with you, Jacob?" He didn't answer. Just turned toward the field, watching the snow fall again, lighter now, almost gentle. That night, he couldn't sleep. The farmhouse creaked in the wind, and the fire in the stove flickered low. Outside, the hound growled again, then went silent. Jacob rose, grabbed his rifle, and stepped into the cold. The world was still, too still. His boots sank deep into the snow as he moved toward the barn. The lantern light trembled in his hand. He stopped at the door. The wood was scratched, deep claw marks gouged into it, fresh. Inside, the smell hit him first. Blood, sharp and metallic. One of the goat pens had been torn open. A single footprint, round, heavy, feline, marked the floor. But what made him freeze wasn't the kill. It was what lay beside it. The steel trap he'd dismantled 2 nights ago, dragged from the forest and dropped there in the middle of the barn. Open. Empty. Jacob's heartbeat thundered in his ears. The bobcat hadn't just returned. It had brought back the trap. He stepped back slowly, his breath misting in the air. Rusty whimpered behind him. From the woods came a low, echoing growl, long and deliberate, almost human in its warning. Jacob stared into the dark line of pines, every muscle in his body tight. Somewhere out there in the snow and silence, something wild remembered him. And it wasn't done yet. Jacob Miles had been called a lot of things in his 58 years. Stubborn old fool was the kindest of them. He wasn't always like that. Once he had a family, laughter in the kitchen, Sunday mornings filled with pancakes and radio music. His wife, Elena, used to say his hands were made for the soil, that the land trusted him. And their daughter, Lucy, with her wild red hair, had followed him everywhere, chasing grasshoppers between the rows of corn, giggling when he pretended not to see her hiding. That was before the accident. It happened 10 years ago on the mountain road near Cody, the kind that wound tight through pine forest and dropped off into black ravines. Jacob was driving. A deer jumped out in the rain. He swerved. The truck went off the road. He woke in a hospital bed with broken ribs and glass in his hair. Elena and Lucy didn't wake at all. After the funeral, the farm became a shell. The laughter stopped. The radio went quiet. The walls seemed to breathe with ghosts. He sold half the cattle, let the rest of the land go wild. The neighbors came around less and less, some out of pity, others out of unease. There was something about Jacob's eyes after the crash, something that made people uncomfortable. They said he talked to the wind, that he kept his wife's chair by the window, untouched. That sometimes, when the night was still, you could hear him calling her name from the fields. None of it was true, and all of it was. Jacob didn't believe in God anymore, but he believed in debt, to the earth, to life, to whatever cruel balance ruled the wilderness. That's why, when he found the bobcat in the trap, something inside him cracked open. He saw in that creature's twisted leg and panicked eyes a reflection of himself, caught, bleeding, still fighting. He couldn't walk away. The morning after the storm, as he fixed the broken gate and fed the horses, he kept seeing those eyes. They followed him in every reflection, every patch of melting snow. He told himself it was guilt, but a deeper part of him, a part he'd buried long ago, felt something else. Recognition. He poured himself coffee, hands shaking, and sat by the window. The world outside was a frozen painting. White fields, black trees, and the faint trail of paw prints vanishing into the woods. He spoke softly, almost like a prayer. "You're out there, ain't you? Watching me." The hound lifted his head, whined low. Jacob reached down, patting the dog's fur absently. "Maybe I'm watching you too." The clock on the wall ticked on, slow and heavy. In that silence, the house felt alive again, not with warmth, but with something stirring, something waiting. That evening, he took out an old box from the attic. Elena's keepsakes, Lucy's school drawings, a photo of them smiling in front of the barn. He placed it on the table beside his coffee cup. The photo trembled slightly in the draft from the window. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft, soundless, endless, and somewhere, far off in the pines, came that same low cry, not of pain this time, but of return. Jacob leaned back in his chair, eyes closing. He didn't know if he should feel peace or fear. By midwinter, life around the valley had settled into a rhythm of frost and silence. To the rest of the village, Jacob Miles was little more than a rumor, a lonely man clinging to a forgotten farm at the edge of nowhere. They saw the smoke from his chimney and called him lucky he hadn't frozen yet. But luck had nothing to do with it. Jacob survived because he understood what others didn't. The land gave only to those who respected it. He mended his fences, tended his few surviving cows, and split firewood until his palms bled. The work kept him alive, though not living. Sometimes, he'd see children from the village drive by on sleds, laughing, their parents waving from the road but never stopping. They whispered he was strange, that he talked to shadows. He didn't blame them. People fear what grief turns a man into. Every evening, he sat on his porch, drinking from the same dented tin cup, watching the sun die behind the pines. Rusty would rest beside him, head on his paws. It was the same silence every night, until the day it wasn't. One evening, Jacob heard the crows scatter from the woods. Then, the sound of snapping twigs, faint but deliberate. He turned. Nothing. Just the tree line swaying in the dusk. Later, he found prints again, fresh, sharp, unmistakable. Bobcat tracks, leading right up to his porch steps before turning away. He stared at them for a long time. The distance between each paw mark suggested confidence, not fear. It had come close enough to see him. That night, he dreamed of Elena's voice. "Not everything wild wants to hurt you," she said. He woke before dawn, heart pounding, unsure if it was comfort or warning. The next morning, he drove into the village for supplies, a rare sight that drew quiet stares at the general store. "Didn't expect to see you out, Miles," said Tom Avery, the butcher, wiping his hands on his apron. Heard something big's been killing livestock around the ridge. You seen anything? Jacob hesitated. Tracks, maybe. Cat prints. Tom frowned. Bobcat? That'd be unusual this close in. Big one too, they say. Real big. Someone by the counter muttered. Probably that old man's pet project. He's always feeding strays. Laughter followed. Jacob's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. He paid for his feed and left, ignoring the eyes on his back. As he loaded his truck, he noticed a poster nailed to the wall beside the store door. Wanted, bounty for wild cat killings, 200 reward. Report any sightings to the sheriff. He stared at it for a long time. The snow had begun again, slow and steady, dusting the corners of the sign. On the drive home, the road wound past the frozen creek where he used to fish with Lucy. For the first time in years, he pulled over and stepped out. The silence pressed against him, thick, alive. He crouched by the ice, seeing his reflection blur with the snowflakes. For a moment, he swore he saw two sets of eyes staring back from beneath the frozen surface, his and something wild. That evening, as dusk fell over the valley, he left a small piece of venison at the edge of the woods. Not bait, not trap, just an offering. He didn't know why. Maybe guilt, maybe faith. When he woke the next morning, the meat was gone. But in its place lay a single crow feather, black and perfect, resting on the snow. Jacob picked it up slowly, his breath hanging in the air. He didn't smile. He just looked toward the forest and whispered, "I reckon you remember me." The forest stayed silent, but the feeling in his chest told him he was right. Something had begun. Something he couldn't yet name. The woods behind Jacob's farm were quiet that morning, too quiet for winter. The usual rustle of birds had vanished, and even the creek sounded muted beneath the ice. Jacob trudged through the drifts, the rifle slung across his back more for comfort than for killing. His breath smoked in the air like the last warmth left in the world. He wasn't hunting. He was following the tracks again, same as before, same sure stride. The prints were larger now, deeper. Whatever left them was strong, deliberate, not just passing through. Half a mile in, the forest thickened. The snow turned blue in the shadows, and the silence pressed close around him. Rusty padded beside him, tail low, ears twitching. Then Jacob stopped. Ahead, under a tangle of frost-covered branches, something moved. Slow, steady. The bobcat stepped into view. Its fur glowed pale gold against the snow, thicker now, the scars on its forelegs still faintly visible where the trap had torn it. It looked bigger, more alive than before, eyes like molten amber fixed on him. Jacob froze. His pulse roared in his ears. "You again," he whispered. The bobcat didn't hiss this time. It stood still, watching him, its breath plumed white, steady, controlled. Rusty growled low, but Jacob raised a hand to silence him. For a long moment, neither moved. The wind brushed through the pines like a sigh. Jacob slowly reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a strip of dried venison, the same kind he'd left at the tree line nights before. He tossed it into the snow between them. The bobcat's ears twitched. It took one step forward, then another. Jacob's throat tightened. "Go on," he murmured. "You earned it." The cat crouched, sniffed the meat, and ate, quick, efficient, never taking its eyes off him. When it finished, it sat back on its haunches, tail flicking once, as if weighing what he was. Jacob felt something shift inside him. For the first time in years, he wasn't afraid. He was seen. "You remember me, don't you?" he said softly. "I freed you from that trap. You didn't owe me anything." The cat tilted its head, eyes unblinking. Then, slowly, so slowly it barely seemed real, it stepped closer. Another pace, then another. Jacob didn't breathe. The distance between them closed until he could see the frost clinging to its whiskers, the twitch of muscle under its coat. When the bobcat stopped, it was no more than a few feet away. Rusty whimpered, but didn't bark. Jacob knelt down, hand extended, palm open. "Ain't gonna hurt you," he said. His voice cracked. "Not then. Not now." The bobcat hesitated. Then, with a grace that felt almost impossible, it lifted its paw, the same leg that had once been caught in the steel trap, and placed it gently over his hand. Jacob's breath caught. His heart hammered in his chest. For a second, just one perfect, breathless second, the wild and the broken met in quiet understanding. Then the bobcat pulled away, turned, and melted back into the trees. Jacob knelt there long after it disappeared, snow gathering on his shoulders. His hand still tingled where the paw had touched. He whispered, "Guess we're even." But deep down, he knew it wasn't over. Something about the way it looked at him, too knowing, too calm, left a knot of unease in his gut. As he turned back toward the farm, the woods behind him stirred again. He didn't see the shadow that moved among the pines, following his trail, silent, patient, watching. That night, the wind died. The valley lay beneath a full moon, pale and sharp as a blade. Every tree, every fence post was outlined in silver. Even the snow seemed to hold its breath. Jacob couldn't sleep. He sat by the stove, a half-empty bottle of whiskey on the table, staring at the old trap he'd dragged home from the barn, the same one that had nearly taken the bobcat's leg. He'd meant to throw it out, but something in him refused. Maybe guilt, maybe respect. Now it sat there, gleaming faintly in the firelight like a ghost of his own making. Rusty stirred beside him, ears twitching. Then, without warning, the dog's head shot up. A low growl rumbled from his throat. Jacob froze. "You hear it too?" Outside, something moved. Not the wind, not a coyote. The sound was deliberate, heavy paws crunching over snow, slow and steady, drawing closer. Jacob rose, the old floorboards creaking beneath his boots. He opened the door. The cold hit him like a slap. The world outside was all silver and silence. Then he saw it. At the edge of the yard, standing beneath the oak tree, was the bobcat. Its fur shimmered faintly in the moonlight, eyes glowing gold. There was no fear in it now, only intent. Jacob stepped onto the porch, heart pounding. "You again," he murmured. "What do you want from me?" The bobcat didn't move. Instead, it lowered its head and dropped something into the snow. Jacob frowned, taking a slow step forward. Rusty stayed behind, whining low. The object gleamed. He knelt to pick it up and froze. It was a piece of torn leather, cracked and familiar. A fragment of an old glove, his glove, the one he'd lost the night of the storm when he freed it from the trap. "How?" His voice caught in the cold. "You carried this all this time?" The bobcat blinked once, unblinking, unreadable. Then it turned its head toward the tree line, as if signaling him to follow. Jacob hesitated. The forest loomed, dark and whispering. He could feel the pull of it, something deep and magnetic. He took a step forward. "All right then," he muttered. "Lead the way." He followed it into the woods. The snow crunched softly under his boots. The air hung heavy with frost and pine. The bobcat moved ahead like a ghost, silent, fluid, always just at the edge of his flashlight's reach. After a while, they came to a clearing. The moonlight spilled over an old trap line, half buried under snow and rust. Dozens of them. The work of poachers, forgotten, but not harmless. Jacob's stomach twisted. He hadn't realized how many there were. The bobcat stood in the center, its breath visible, tail low. "I get it," Jacob whispered. "You're showing me what's left. What they did." He crouched, brushing snow off a trap, his hands trembling. "Damn them," he muttered. "Damn all of us." He reached for the mechanism, prying it open one by one. The metal screeched. The sound echoed through the clearing like a cry of pain. The bobcat watched, unmoving. When the last trap snapped open, Jacob looked up, but the clearing was empty. The cat was gone. Only the faint warmth of its paw prints remained, leading back toward the ridge. Jacob stood there a long time, his breath fogging the air, hands raw from the steel. For the first time in years, he felt something other than guilt. He felt purpose. When he finally turned back toward home, the horizon was paling with the first light of dawn. But as he crossed the final fence, he noticed something strange. The tracks that led back to the forest weren't alone anymore. Right beside the bobcat's prints were his own, perfectly mirrored, step for step. He stared down at them, heartbeat hammering. Whatever had begun between them that night, it wasn't over. It was becoming something far greater. The first body was found 3 days later. Not a human one, but close enough. A calf from the Turner Ranch, torn open along the ribs, the snow stained red for yards around. The prints nearby were feline, large, deliberate. Not a coyote, not a dog. And everyone in the village knew who they'd blame before the sheriff even showed up. By noon, Jacob Miles's name was already being passed from porch to porch like a curse. "He's been feeding that thing," said Tom Avery at the general store. "Saw him out in the woods talking to himself last week. My cousin swears he heard it. Sounded like a woman screaming." "The man's not right," another voice muttered. "He lost his mind after his wife died. Maybe he called the thing here." By dusk, someone had nailed a handwritten warning to his gate. "Keep your monster out of our land." Jacob found it fluttering in the wind when he came home from mending his fence. He stared at the words, jaw tight, and tore the sign down without a word. Inside, the house felt colder than usual. Rusty lay by the stove but wouldn't stop growling, low and steady. Jacob poured himself coffee and sat at the table watching the fire. The air smelled of iron and wood smoke. Then, a knock. Hard. Sudden. He opened the door to find Sheriff Colin Harner, a stocky man in a brown coat, snow crusted on his boots. His face was drawn, his tone sharp. "Jacob," he said, "we need to talk." "About what?" "About the killings. Turner's lost a calf. Miller's chickens, too. Folks are scared. You know how small towns get. When they don't understand something, they look for a name to pin it on." Jacob's eyes narrowed. "And you think that name's mine?" Harner sighed, taking off his hat. "I didn't say that. But people remember what you told them. About that cat you set free." "I didn't set it free," Jacob said quietly. "I let it live." The sheriff looked past him, into the shadows of the house. "You see it again?" Jacob hesitated. "Maybe." "That a yes or a no?" "A maybe." Harner exhaled, long and weary. "If you do, don't try to play hero again. I got men setting traps out by the ridge, big ones. You stay clear, Jacob. Don't make this harder than it has to be." Jacob's jaw clenched. You put traps out there again, and it's not the cat you'll hurt. It's yourself. The sheriff stared at him, eyes narrowing. You threatening me? I'm warning you, Jacob said, voice low. That thing's not like others. It remembers. Harner's lip twitched. You talk like it's got a soul. Jacob's gaze didn't waver. Maybe it's the only one around here that still does. The sheriff left without another word, boots crunching through the snow. Jacob stood there long after he was gone, the cold gnawing through his coat. The night felt heavier than before, like the land itself was listening. Later, as he went to lock the barn, he saw movement near the tree line again, a shadow gliding between the pines. The air shimmered around it, faint and alive. Rusty barked once, sharp. Then came the sound that froze Jacob's blood. A single gunshot echoing through the valley, followed by a scream. From far off, another voice shouted, "We got it! We got the beast!" Jacob dropped the lantern and ran toward the woods. The storm clouds swallowed the moonlight, and the snow began to fall again, thick and furious. He didn't know what he would find. But deep down, he already feared the truth. The snow came down in blinding sheets as Jacob ran. Each breath burned his lungs, each step cracked through the crusted ice. The sound of men shouting echoed through the valley, sharp, broken, panicked. He burst through the clearing near the ridge and saw lanterns swaying like ghosts. 5 men stood in a half-circle, rifles raised, breath steaming in the cold. In the center lay something dark and motionless. Jacob's heart lurched. "Don't shoot!" he shouted, slipping on the frozen ground. "Don't!" Sheriff Harner turned toward him, face pale under the brim of his hat. "Jacob, stop right there." But Jacob didn't. He shoved through the line of men and dropped to his knees beside the shape in the snow. It wasn't the Bobcat. It was Eli Turner, the rancher's nephew, no more than 20, eyes glassy, a deep gash across his throat. The snow around him was crimson. "My God," Jacob whispered. "What did you do?" One of the hunters stepped back, trembling. He shot at something in the trees. Next thing we knew, he was down. I swear, it moved so fast. Another interrupted, voice shaking. "I saw it. I saw the cat. Big as a wolf, eyes like fire." Sheriff Harner barked, "Enough! Check the perimeter, see if it's still out there." Jacob stayed frozen beside the body. The air smelled of copper and gunpowder. The boy's hand was curled tight around the trigger of his rifle, finger stiff in death. The barrel still smoked faintly. Harner knelt beside him, grim. "God help us. This'll turn the whole damn town upside down." Jacob looked up at him, voice hoarse. "You think the cat did this?" The sheriff's jaw tightened. "You got a better guess?" Jacob stared at the boy's wound, clean, precise, not torn, not shredded like an animal kill. A single slice, deep and angled, as if by something sharp or deliberate. He felt his stomach twist. "That ain't how a bobcat kills," he murmured. The sheriff straightened. "You saying it's human?" Jacob didn't answer. His eyes drifted to the edge of the clearing, where a trail of paw prints cut through the snow. They weren't running away. They were circling the men's footprints, like a warning. "Whatever's out there," Jacob said, "it's not hunting for food anymore." Harner looked at him sharply. "What the hell's that supposed to mean?" "It's hunting for balance." A sudden crack split the air. Another gunshot, closer this time. One of the hunters screamed. They all turned. Down the slope near the old pine grove, a man stumbled into view, clutching his arm, blood pouring between his fingers. His rifle was gone. Behind him, the shadows moved, something fast, silent, powerful. "Move!" Harner shouted. But before any of them could react, the shape leapt from the trees, a blur of gold and white, and vanished into the deeper forest. The men fired wildly, bullets sparking off frozen bark. The echoes rolled like thunder through the valley. When silence fell again, all that remained was the wind and a line of paw prints leading back toward Jacob's land. The sheriff turned to him, eyes hard. "You see that? It's heading for your place. You better pray I find it before I do." Jacob's pulse hammered. "You won't," he said quietly, "because it ain't hunting me." Harner stared at him, disbelief flickering into anger. "You think you can talk sense into a damn predator?" Jacob met his gaze, calm, cold. "Maybe I already did." The sheriff spat into the snow. "You've lost it, old man." As the men gathered their wounded and the dead, Jacob stood apart, staring into the darkness of the woods. He could still see the faint glow of eyes in the distance, steady, watching him. And in that moment, he understood something terrible. The cat wasn't just defending itself. It was sending a message. By the next morning, fear had turned to fury. The village gathered outside the general store, men in thick coats, rifles slung over shoulders, eyes hard. The death of Eli Turner had cracked something open in them. Now they wanted blood. "We can't let that thing roam free," Tom Avery shouted. "You seen what it did to Eli? What if it's one of ours next?" Voices rose, hot and sharp in the cold air. "Sheriff says it came from Jacob's woods." "Then that's where we start. He's protecting the damn beast." By noon, a crowd had formed. Torches, traps, guns. Someone had carved a sign into a piece of pine and nailed it to the front of a pickup. "The beast dies tonight." Sheriff Harner tried to calm them, but the mob had already chosen its course. He knew this kind of rage. You couldn't reason with it once it had a target. When the first trucks turned down the snow-packed road to Jacob's farm, the sound of engines rolled through the valley like thunder. Jacob heard it long before he saw the lights. He was fixing the fence when Rusty began barking wildly, hackles raised. Then came the glow, orange and flickering, from torches. Dozens of them, cutting through the falling snow. He stood still, hands gripping the fence post, as the convoy stopped at the edge of his land. Sheriff Harner stepped out first, face drawn tight. "Jacob, don't do anything stupid. Let us handle this." "Handle it?" Jacob's voice was calm, but his eyes burned. "By burning my place down?" From behind the sheriff, Tom Avery shouted, "You brought this on us! You and that devil cat!" Jacob took a slow step forward. "That animal saved more lives than you'll ever know." The crowd muttered, restless. A rifle clicked. "You listen to me," Harner said quietly. "They're scared. Just tell us where you last saw it, and we'll finish this." Jacob shook his head. "You finish this, and you'll regret it till you die." A man from the back yelled, "He's hiding it!" Another shouted, "Search the barn!" In seconds, half a dozen men pushed through the fence. Rusty lunged, barking furiously. One of them swung a rifle butt to scare him off. Jacob caught it mid-swing, twisting the weapon away with surprising strength. "Touch that dog again," he growled, "and you'll lose more than your gun." The tension snapped like ice underfoot. Rifles raised, voices screamed. The sheriff pushed between them, shouting, "Enough! Stand down!" But then it came. A sound that cut through the chaos like thunder splitting a mountain. A roar, deep, wild, furious, rolled from the tree line. The torches flickered. Every head turned toward the dark woods. There, just beyond the last line of pines, two golden eyes glowed. The bobcat stepped forward, fur bristling, muscles coiled. Snow swirled around it like mist. Someone fired. The bullet tore through the air, missing by inches. The cat leapt sideways, vanished into shadow. Then all hell broke loose. Men shouted, firing blindly. The sheriff yelled for order, but no one listened. Flames licked higher as torches fell into the drifts. Jacob ran toward the forest, shouting over the gunfire, "Stop! You'll kill each other before you ever touch it!" But they didn't hear him. In the panic, one of the trucks caught fire, gasoline spilling, crackling through the snow. The sheriff grabbed Jacob's arm. "You want to die with it? That it?" Jacob tore free. "If that's what it takes to make you see." He vanished into the trees, the gunfire echoing behind him, Rusty at his heels. The mob watched him disappear into the dark, into the place where the beast waited. And for the first time, even the bravest of them hesitated to follow. Because deep down, they all felt it. The forest wasn't just Jacob's anymore. It belonged to something older, something wild, and it was awake. The forest swallowed him whole. Jacob ran until the gunfire faded behind him, until the only sounds were his own heartbeat and Rusty's labored breaths beside him. Snow whipped through the trees like smoke. The deeper he went, the quieter it became, unnaturally quiet, as if even the wind feared to enter this place. He stopped beside the frozen creek, chest heaving, and sank to his knees. The world glowed faintly blue in the moonlight. His breath came in ragged clouds. For a moment, he just sat there, staring at his reflection in the ice. An old man, hair silver, face carved by grief. A man who once thought he understood the world and lost everything because of it. The memories came like waves he couldn't fight back anymore. Elena's laughter in the kitchen. Lucy's red hair tangled in his fingers as she hugged him goodnight. The headlights cutting through the rain. The deer. The crash. The silence afterward. He had buried their bodies on the hill behind the farmhouse, under the oak that never seemed to lose its leaves. Every morning since, he'd looked at that hill and thought about what should have been. He whispered now, to no one and everyone, "I killed him. Not the deer, not the road, me." Rusty whined softly, pressing close to his side. Jacob's eyes drifted to the woods, and he saw a flicker of movement, gold against the snow. The bobcat stepped into the clearing. It moved like mist, silent, perfect. The moonlight caught the scars on its leg, the one he'd freed. Their eyes met again. Jacob didn't move. He couldn't. "Why?" he whispered. "Why me? You could have torn me apart that night." The cat stood still, tail low, breath steady. Then, in a motion so deliberate it seemed almost human, it limped forward and sat, just out of reach. Jacob swallowed hard. "You came back for revenge, didn't you?" Silence. He let out a broken laugh. "I wouldn't blame you." His voice cracked. "You lost blood because of me. I lost everything because of me. Guess that makes us the same kind of fool." The bobcat blinked slowly, unblinking, patient. Its gaze wasn't angry. It wasn't forgiving either. It was knowing. Jacob's chest tightened. "You remember that trap? The one that tore into you?" He gestured at his own arm, where the scar still marked his flesh. "It's still here. Still hurts when the weather turns cold." He looked down, voice dropping. "That's the thing about wounds, ain't it? You think they heal, but they just wait. Wait till you forget. Then they bleed again." The cat's ears twitched. It tilted its head slightly, almost as if listening. Jacob wiped his face with his sleeve. They say man's got dominion over the earth, that we're supposed to tame it. He looked up, eyes glinting. But maybe the truth is the earth's just waiting for us to remember we were never the masters. He took a slow breath. Maybe that's why you came back. Rusty whimpered softly, inching closer to the bobcat, tail wagging low. To Jacob's astonishment, the cat didn't move. The dog and the predator stared at each other. Then, in a gesture so small it might have been missed, the bobcat lowered its head slightly. A sign of peace. Jacob whispered, "You came to make me see." For a long moment, they simply existed there. Man, dog, and wildcat, in the silent glow of the frozen world. Then the wind shifted. Somewhere in the distance, the faint echo of engines and shouting returned. The mob was coming closer. The bobcat turned its head toward the sound, its ears flattened. It rose slowly, muscles tensing, eyes sharp. Jacob felt the meaning before he understood it. It wasn't afraid for itself. It was warning him. He rose to his feet. "You think they'll listen?" The cat looked back at him, steady, fierce, untamed. Then it darted into the darkness, snow flying in its wake. Jacob stood there, chest pounding. Rusty barked once, sharp and urgent. He looked toward the village lights flickering on the horizon. "Guess not," he murmured. "Guess I'll have to show them myself." He slung the rifle off his back, not to fight, but to stand his ground. For the first time in years, his fear was gone. All that remained was resolve. The forest grew darker as Jacob pressed deeper into it. Behind him, the sounds of men and metal crept closer. Chains rattling, boots crunching through snow, dogs barking wild and desperate. He moved quickly but quietly, keeping low, letting instinct lead him. Rusty trotted at his heel, alert. The air smelled of pine and gun oil. Every sound felt sharper now, every breath louder. He knew what was coming. A hunt. Not just for the bobcat, for him. Through the trees ahead, lantern light flickered. He recognized the voices. Avery's men, armed with rifles, setting fresh traps. Jacob crouched behind a fallen log, heart pounding. "Spread out!" Avery barked. "Sheriff says it's headed this way. We'll box it in." They laid steel jaws into the snow, clicking them open with practiced cruelty. Jacob's chest tightened at the sound. That cold, metallic snap. It was the same that had nearly severed the bobcat's leg. The same sound that haunted his dreams. He couldn't watch it happen again. He waited until they moved to the next ridge, then crept out one by one, disarming the traps. Each click, each release felt like a confession, like opening the cages inside his own chest. When the last one snapped free, he whispered, "No more." But the wind carried something else, a voice, low, sharp, familiar. "Jacob?" Sheriff Harner's silhouette appeared through the fog of snow, rifle in hand. "What the hell are you doing? You trying to get yourself killed?" Jacob straightened slowly. "You shouldn't be here." Harner shook his head. "You think you can stop this? They're coming. Whole damn towns out for blood." "They don't want justice," Jacob said quietly. "They want to feel safe, and they think killing something wild'll give it to them." The sheriff lowered his rifle slightly. "You're protecting that cat like it's your kin." Jacob's eyes glimmered. "Maybe it is." Before Harner could speak, Rusty growled, a deep, warning rumble. From the shadows, something moved. The bobcat emerged, slow, silent, deliberate. Its fur was matted with snow, its breath steaming in the air. It didn't lunge, didn't run. It simply stood between Jacob and the approaching light of the mob behind him. Harner raised his rifle. "Get back, Jacob!" Jacob spread his arms wide. "You shoot it! You'll have to shoot me first! Damn it, move!" "No." His voice was calm, steady as the falling snow. "You kill it, and this valley'll never know peace again." The sheriff's finger trembled on the trigger. Then a sound shattered the stillness, a gunshot from behind. Jacob turned in time to see Tom Avery stomping through the snow, rifle still smoking. "Move, Miles! That thing's taken enough from us!" But the shot hadn't hit the cat. It had hit Rusty. The dog yelped, stumbled, and fell into the snow, his fur staining red. Jacob's scream tore through the trees, a sound more primal than human. He dropped beside the dog, pressing his hands against the wound, breath ragged. "No, no, stay with me, boy. Please!" The bobcat stood frozen, watching, muscles trembling. Something inside Jacob snapped. He looked up, eyes burning through tears. "You happy now, Tom? You got your blood!" Avery spat into the snow. "Should have happened long ago. You and that beast are the same damn curse." The bobcat growled, low and rumbling like thunder beneath the ground. Avery swung his rifle toward it. Jacob lunged. The two men struggled, boots sliding on ice, snow flying. The rifle went off again, a flash of light in the storm. When the smoke cleared, Avery was on the ground, clutching his shoulder, screaming. Jacob stood above him, chest heaving, the rifle in his hands. The sheriff yelled, "Jacob, stop!" Jacob didn't answer. He turned toward the cat, the storm swirling between them. "Go," he whispered. "Get out of here. They'll never stop hunting you." The bobcat stared at him for a long moment, then padded closer, close enough that he could see his own reflection in its eyes. It lowered its head, brushing against his coat. For a heartbeat, Jacob felt everything. Grief, guilt, forgiveness, all tangled into one unbearable ache. Then, with a final glance, the bobcat disappeared into the storm. Jacob dropped to his knees beside Rusty, cradling the dog's still body. The snow fell heavier now, covering the blood, the footprints, the traps. Behind him, the sheriff called for help, men shouting, chaos spreading. But Jacob didn't move. He just stared into the white expanse, whispering, "Guess we both had to bleed before the world could rest." And as the storm swallowed the last sound of gunfire, he felt it. A strange, impossible calm. Not peace, but something like release. The storm broke at dawn. Jacob woke to silence, the kind that hums after something terrible has passed. The snow had stopped falling. Smoke from the burned trucks curled above the trees in slow, gray ribbons. He sat on the frozen ground beside Rusty's body, his coat stiff with blood and frost. Around him, the forest lay still. No shouts, no gunfire. Only the soft crackle of ice melting under a weak sun. He didn't know how long he'd sat there before he felt the touch. Something brushed against his shoulder, light, deliberate. He turned. The bobcat stood a few feet away. Its fur was dusted with snow, eyes softer than he'd ever seen them. There was no anger, no fear, just a quiet understanding that words could never reach. Jacob's throat tightened. "You shouldn't have come back." The cat tilted its head, as if disagreeing. It stepped closer, slow and cautious. Jacob looked down at Rusty, then back at the bobcat. "He tried to protect me. Guess that makes two of you now." The cat crouched beside the dog's body, nose brushing the fur. It stayed there for a long moment, unmoving, like it was paying respect. Then it turned to Jacob again and let out a low, throaty sound. Not a growl, almost a purr. Jacob reached out his trembling hand. "If you're going to end this, I won't stop you." But the bobcat didn't strike. It pressed its head against his palm. The warmth of its fur shocked him. It was alive, vibrant, real. He felt its heartbeat strong and steady beneath his fingers. Something broke loose inside him then. Not pain this time. Something older. Forgiveness. He whispered, voice cracking, "I'm sorry. For the traps. For all of it." The bobcat blinked slowly, leaned its weight against his hand. In the quiet of that ruined morning, man and beast simply stayed there. Two survivors beneath the same broken sky. When the sheriff and his men finally found them hours later, the forest was calm again. They approached with guns drawn, but the sight stopped them cold. Jacob sat in the snow, blood on his coat, the dead dog at his feet. Beside him, the bobcat lay curled, not asleep, but resting, head on its paws, tail flicking lazily. "Don't shoot," Jacob said without looking up. "It's over?" Sheriff Harner stared in disbelief. "You tamed it?" Jacob shook his head. "No one tames what ain't meant to be tamed." The men hesitated, murmuring among themselves. One of them whispered, "It could still kill him." Jacob looked down at the cat, then back at the sheriff. "If it wanted to, I'd already be gone." Harner lowered his rifle slowly. "You should get out of here, Jacob. Folks won't understand this." "Never did," Jacob said quietly. The sheriff studied him a long moment, then sighed. "You always did see things different. Guess that's what makes you the fool, or the only one with any sense." He turned to his men. "Let's go. Leave 'em." When they left, Jacob stayed where he was until the last echo of their boots disappeared. Then he spoke softly, not sure if he was talking to the cat, to Rusty, or to himself. "Seems like the whole damn world's scared of anything that don't fit the rules." The cat lifted its head, eyes glinting amber in the sunlight. Jacob smiled faintly. "Guess we're both still here. That's something, ain't it?" It was the first time he'd smiled in 10 years. He rose slowly, his knees stiff, and began walking back toward the farmhouse. The bobcat followed, silent as a shadow. Behind them, the snow glistened red and white, like the land itself was starting to forget. The days that followed were quieter than any Jacob could remember. The storm had stripped the valley bare, trees bowed under the weight of ice, fences half buried, silence stretched for miles. The village stayed away. No one came down his road anymore, maybe out of fear, maybe guilt. Jacob didn't mind. For once, the solitude didn't feel empty. He spent the mornings clearing debris from the barn, mending the roof, rebuilding what the fire had taken. Each time he looked up, he saw the bobcat watching from the ridge. Not hiding, just watching. At first, it never came closer. Then, slowly, it began to linger near the edge of the field. Jacob would leave scraps from breakfast on a flat stone by the porch. Bits of meat, bread, a bowl of water. By nightfall, they were gone. One evening, as he sat on the steps sipping coffee, he heard a soft crunch in the snow. He turned, and there it was. The bobcat padded up to the porch, fur shimmering gold in the fading light. Jacob set his cup down, moving slowly. "Well," he murmured, "took you long enough." The cat stopped just short of his boots. They stared at each other for a long, silent moment. Then, to his astonishment, it climbed the first step and sat beside him, close enough that he could feel the warmth of its body through the cold. Jacob chuckled softly. Didn't think you'd be the social type. The bobcat blinked, tail flicking lazily. It looked up at the horizon, where the sun bled orange over the snow. For a brief second, Jacob saw the reflection of that same sunset in its eyes, and he swore it looked peaceful. He reached out a hand. The cat hesitated, then pressed its head gently against his fingers. Jacob froze, barely breathing. The fur was soft, thick, alive. He whispered, "Guess we're both learning how to trust again." That became their rhythm. By day, Jacob worked the fields, repaired fences, and chopped wood. The bobcat followed from a distance, sometimes disappearing into the trees, only to reappear at dusk. At night, it would rest by the porch steps, its golden eyes gleaming faintly in the dark, like twin lanterns keeping watch. One morning, he woke to find it curled near the hearth inside the barn, tail wrapped neatly around its paws. It didn't move when he entered, just flicked an ear as if to say, "This is my spot now." Jacob grinned. "Fine, but rent's due come spring." It became a quiet companionship. He talked while he worked, about Elena, about Lucy, about how the winters used to be harsher but the world softer. The cat listened, never interrupting, never judging. Sometimes when he laughed, it would tilt its head, ears twitching, as if it understood. Once, he found it staring at the hill behind the farmhouse, where two wooden crosses stood beneath the oak. He walked over, standing beside it. The air was still. "They were good people," he said softly. "Better than I ever deserved." The cat lowered its head, silent. In that moment, Jacob felt something shift, a weight lifting, slowly, gently. The grief that had lived inside him for a decade didn't vanish, but it finally had somewhere to rest. By spring, grass pushed through the snow, and birds returned to the valley. Jacob noticed the bobcat wandering farther, disappearing for hours before returning at night. It had the wild back in its step, the freedom he'd once given it. He knew what it meant. Still, when it came to him one evening, brushing its side against his leg before trotting toward the forest, he smiled through the ache in his chest. "You don't owe me anything," he said. "Just don't forget where home is." The cat stopped at the edge of the woods and turned its head, eyes glowing in the twilight. For a long heartbeat, neither moved. Then it vanished into the trees. Jacob stood there, the porch light flickering behind him, wind rustling the grass where snow once lay. And for the first time in 10 years, the valley didn't feel haunted. It felt alive. Spring came late that year. For weeks, the thaw crept slow across the valley, snow melting in silver rivulets, streams swelling, birds calling again in the high trees. Jacob's farm breathed once more. He mended fences, planted early seed, and caught himself humming sometimes, without meaning to. The bobcat had been gone for days, maybe weeks. He'd grown used to its absences, but this time felt different. The nights were too still, the woods too quiet. One morning, he saw vultures circling low over the ridge. A sick weight settled in his gut. He grabbed his coat and rifle and started walking. The air grew colder as he climbed, the wind heavy with the smell of rot. When he reached the ridge, he stopped dead. There, tangled in the brush, was a trapline. New, freshly set. Not rusted like before. Polished. Shiny. He felt the blood drain from his face. "God damn it," he whispered. Beside one of the traps, the snow was torn up, blood spattered like paint, and a few feet away, a single paw print, deep and smeared. Jacob followed the trail, heart hammering. It led down through the pines to the creek bed, then vanished among the shadows. That's where he found it. The bobcat lay half submerged in the mud, chest rising shallowly. Blood matted its fur, a cruel steel trap still clamped around its hind leg. Jacob dropped to his knees. No, 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 no. He pried at the steel with trembling hands, the cold biting deep into his fingers. The jaws refused to budge. The cat groaned low, eyes fluttering open, pupils wide, wild with pain and fear. "It's all right," Jacob whispered, his voice cracking. I got you, I swear." He pulled harder until his palms tore, until the rusted teeth finally gave with a shriek of metal. The trap snapped open, and the bobcat slumped free, gasping. Jacob tore off his flannel sleeve, wrapping it tight around the wound. "Stay with me," he muttered. "You hear me? You don't get to leave me like everyone else did." But as he lifted the animal into his arms, he saw movement at the tree line. 3 figures, rifles, hunters. Tom Avery was among them, arm still bandaged from the gunfight weeks before. His face twisted into a grin when he saw Jacob. "Well, look at that," he called. "The old man and his monster." Jacob rose slowly, the bobcat limp against his chest. "You did this?" Avery shrugged. "What did you expect? Cat like that's worth a small fortune. Ain't no room for predators round here." Jacob's grip tightened on the rifle. "You're talking about yourself now." Avery lifted his gun. "Step away from it." The air went still. Even the birds stopped calling. Jacob's mind flashed with images. Elena's laughter, Lucy's bright hair, Rusty's last breath. And now this creature, broken and bleeding in his arms, the only living thing that ever looked at him without judgment. He shook his head. "No." Avery's jaw clenched. "Don't make me." But Jacob had already stepped between the cat and the guns. "If you want it, you'll have to shoot through me." The hunters exchanged uneasy glances. The sheriff's words echoed in Jacob's memory. "They'll never understand you." Avery's finger tightened on the trigger. Jacob raised his rifle, not to aim, but to throw it aside. The metal clattering to the ground. He stood barehanded, eyes blazing. "You already took enough from me? You're not taking this too?" For a moment, no one moved. Then Avery shouted, "Fine!" and fired. The crack tore through the valley. Jacob staggered. The bullet missed his heart by inches, grazing his shoulder. He dropped to one knee but didn't fall. The bobcat stirred weakly in his arms, blood staining his shirt. Avery reloaded, stepping closer. "Should have stayed dead with your damn dog." But behind him, a sound rose, low, guttural, growing louder. The forest itself seemed to breathe. From the shadows came another roar. Not one, but several. Golden eyes appeared between the trees. 1 pair, 2, 5. Jacob's breath caught. There were more. The forest erupted. Out of the darkness poured shapes. 3 bobcats. Maybe more. Moving like shadows torn loose from the trees. Their growls blended into one sound. Ancient, furious, alive. Ivory stumbled back, eyes wide. "Jesus Christ!" He fired blindly. The echo crashed through the woods, scattering crows from the treetops. One of the cats lunged, fast as lightning. Avery's shot went wild. The animal hit him square in the chest, knocking him into the snow. He screamed as claws raked across his coat, gun skidding from his grasp. The other hunters turned, firing into the shadows, bullets snapping through the air. Jacob ducked low, shielding the wounded bobcat in his arms. "No, no, stop! You'll bring the whole damn forest down!" but it was too late. The storm of claws and screams filled the valley. Jacob crawled to a fallen log, laying the injured cat down behind it. Blood soaked through the makeshift bandage. Its chest rose and fell shallowly. "Stay with me," he whispered, voice breaking. "You fought too hard to quit now." The chaos raged around him, Avery's men shouting, the forest roaring back. One of the hunters fell silent with a choked gasp. The smell of gunpowder burned in the cold. Then, silence. Jacob lifted his head. The air shimmered with steam and breath. Bodies lay still in the snow. 2 men, motionless. The others had fled. Avery crawled backward, clutching his chest, blood streaking his sleeve. One of the bobcats, the largest, stood over him, snarling low. "Call it off," Avery rasped, eyes wide with terror. "It ain't natural. This ain't natural." Jacob rose slowly, the world spinning around him. "No," he said quietly. "What you call unnatural is just something you never bothered to understand." He took a step toward Avery, his shoulder bleeding, his breath ragged. "You trapped it. You bled it. You never once thought it could feel pain." Avery's voice trembled. "It's a monster." Jacob looked down at the dying cat behind him, then back at Avery. "No, it's us." For a heartbeat, the forest went still. Even the snow seemed to pause midair. Then the wounded bobcat, the one Jacob had saved, stirred. With what little strength it had left, it pushed itself to its feet, limping, trembling, and limped toward him. Jacob knelt, reaching out a steady hand. The cat pressed its head into his palm, just once, before turning toward Avery. The other bobcats parted silently, making way. Avery backed away, hands shaking. Don't you come any closer." But the cat didn't attack. It stopped just short, stared at him, and let out a single deep growl, a warning, not vengeance. Then it turned and looked at Jacob again. Jacob nodded faintly, tears streaking the grime on his face. "Go. Be free." The cat blinked, then staggered toward the woods. One by one, the others followed, melting back into the trees like smoke. The forest fell quiet again. Only the wind moved through the branches, whispering like a hymn. Jacob slumped to his knees. The pain in his shoulder flared hot. Blood soaked through his shirt. He looked up at the clearing, at the wreckage, the rifles, the still bodies, and then at Avery, who sat trembling in the snow, eyes hollow. "You can go tell him whatever story you want," Jacob said softly. "Call me crazy. Call it a beast. But you'll remember what you saw." Avery swallowed hard, his breath hitching. "They'll never believe it." Jacob smiled weakly. "Then maybe that's for the best." He turned toward the tree line, where faint tracks disappeared into the dark. The bobcats were gone, leaving only silence and snow. He whispered, almost to the wind, "Thank you." Then his legs gave out. The last thing he saw before darkness took him was a golden shape watching from the edge of the trees, eyes warm, steady, unafraid. And for the first time since the crash all those years ago, Jacob Miles felt peace. When the search party found him the next morning, the storm had cleared. The air was sharp and clean, the kind of cold that stung the lungs but made the world look brand new. They found Jacob Miles lying in the snow, barely breathing. His rifle was half buried beside him, blood frozen across his shoulder. Around him, the clearing was quiet. No movement, no tracks except his own, and a faint trail leading back into the woods. No one spoke. Even the men who'd come with anger in their hearts couldn't find words. Sheriff Harner knelt beside him, pressing 2 fingers to his neck. "He's alive," he whispered. Relief flickered across his face. "Get him up. Careful now." As they lifted him onto a makeshift sled, Harner looked around at the shattered ground, broken rifles, claw marks in the snow, the silence thick as prayer. He'd seen plenty of violence in his years, but this felt different. It felt balanced. They brought Jacob back to the farmhouse. He drifted in and out of consciousness, fevered, whispering fragments of words. Trap. Let it go. Golden eyes. For 2 days, he hovered between life and death. The village doctor stitched the wound, shaking his head. "Damn fool's tougher than he looks." Harner stayed by his bedside through the nights, listening to the wind howl outside. Once, near dawn, he thought he heard something else. A low, distant growl carried on the breeze. Not threatening, just watching. When Jacob finally woke, it was to the faint light of morning spilling through the curtains. His arm was bandaged, his throat dry as dust. Harner sat beside the bed, sipping coffee from a tin cup. "Welcome back," the sheriff said quietly. "You had us worried." Jacob's lips cracked into a faint smile. "Still here, huh?" "Barely," Harner replied. "Doc says you'll make it. The others, well, they're gone. Packed up, left town. Word travels fast when the forest bites back." Jacob stared at the ceiling for a long moment. "And the cat?" Harner hesitated. "No one's seen it since that night." Jacob nodded slowly. "Good." "You really think it understood you?" Harner asked after a pause. Jacob turned his head, eyes distant but clear. "Don't need to think. I know." The sheriff looked away, rubbing the back of his neck. "Folks are saying you're lucky to be alive." Jacob gave a low, tired laugh. "Luck's got nothing to do with it. Maybe it just wasn't done with me yet." Outside, the wind picked up again. Snow swirled past the window in soft spirals. For a moment, the shape of a paw print appeared on the glass, melting almost as soon as it formed. Jacob watched it disappear, eyes soft. "It's still out there," he murmured. "Keeping the balance." Harner followed his gaze, frowning. "You really believe that?" Jacob smiled faintly. "I used to believe a man could own the land. Now I know we're just guests." He leaned back, exhaling slowly. "And some guests come to teach you how to stay alive." For a long time, neither of them spoke. The clock ticked. The fire popped. Somewhere beyond the tree line, a crow called once, then again. When Harner finally left, Jacob sat alone in the quiet. He looked at the empty chair by the window, the one where Elena used to sit, and thought of the hill behind the house. Later that afternoon, he walked there, his arm still in a sling. The snow had thinned, revealing the earth beneath. 2 wooden crosses stood beneath the oak, sunlight spilling through bare branches. He stood there for a long time. Then, from somewhere deep in the forest, came a single haunting sound, a bobcat's cry, low and clear, rolling across the valley. Jacob smiled through the ache in his chest. "Go on," he whispered. "The world's yours again." The wind carried his words away, and the forest answered with silence. But for a moment, just before the light faded, he thought he saw it, a golden shadow moving along the ridge, pausing, watching him one last time before vanishing into the trees. And Jacob Miles finally understood. Some debts aren't paid with blood, but with mercy. Summer came gently that year, as if the valley itself was trying to make peace. The snows melted early. Wildflowers pushed through the thawing earth. The trees that once stood like skeletons now shimmered green beneath a kind sun. The world that had almost died was breathing again, and so was Jacob Miles. He moved slower these days. His shoulder still ached when he lifted heavy tools, and the scar down his arm had gone pale against his skin. But he worked, steadily, quietly. He fixed the fence, rebuilt the barn door, and planted new seed. The village never came to apologize. They didn't have to. Their absence was its own kind of truce. Word had spread about that night in the forest, about the storm, the blood, and the way nature seemed to rise up in Jacob's defense. Some called it divine retribution. Others just called it madness. Jacob didn't care. He knew what he'd seen. He knew what had looked back at him. Every evening, when the sun slid low behind the ridge, he'd sit on the porch with a tin cup of coffee, eyes fixed on the tree line. The silence that once haunted him now felt like company. Sometimes he swore he could hear it. Soft paw steps in the grass, faint but familiar. Other times, he caught a glimpse of golden fur slipping through the tall weeds near the barn, gone before he could blink. He didn't chase. He didn't call. He'd learned that some things only come back when they're ready. One morning, he found something on the porch steps, a crow feather, black and perfect, lying in the same place where he used to leave food. He smiled, running his thumb along its edge. "Guess you're still around," he murmured. Life took on a new rhythm. The birds returned. A family of foxes made their den near the creek. The air was full of noise again, the good kind. And for the first time in a decade, the farm felt alive. Jacob started talking again too. Not to people, but to the world around him. He'd greet the crows, thank the river for running clear. He even built a small wooden post at the edge of the woods, carving a few simple words into it. No traps beyond this line. Here, everything gets to live. He didn't know if anyone would see it. Maybe the point was that they didn't have to. Some nights, when the moon rose full over the fields, he'd sit by the window and catch the faintest reflection of golden eyes out there, watching. He'd smile softly. "Still keeping an eye on me, huh?" Then he'd go back to sleep, trusting the world again. Months passed. The grass grew tall. The crops came in thick. The sheriff stopped by once, dropping off supplies and news from town. He stood on the porch, looking out at the peaceful fields. "Doesn't look much like the same place," Harner said quietly. Jacob handed him a cup of coffee. "Ain't the same man working it either." Harner chuckled, shaking his head. "You really believe that cat's still out there?" Jacob didn't answer. He just looked toward the woods, where the wind stirred the leaves in slow, graceful ripples. "Some things you don't need to believe," he said. "You just know." The sheriff studied him a moment, then nodded. "Take care of yourself, Jacob." When he left, the valley went still again. Soft, alive, listening. Later that evening, as dusk painted the sky orange and violet, Jacob walked up the hill behind the farmhouse. The grass shimmered underfoot, and the oak tree above the graves cast long shadows over the earth. He knelt between the two crosses, brushed a hand across the wooden names. "You'd have liked this place now," he whispered. "Peaceful, honest." A breeze rose, warm and steady. He closed his eyes and felt it move through his hair, across his face, almost like a touch. Then faintly, a sound, a soft rustle in the tall grass. He opened his eyes. At the edge of the hill, framed by the sinking sun, stood the bobcat. Its coat gleamed gold and gray. Its body looked stronger now, healed. Beside it, smaller, cautious, a cub peeked from behind its legs. Jacob froze. His heart stumbled in his chest. The adult bobcat watched him for a long time, unblinking, calm. Then it let out a low, rumbling sound. Not a growl, but something deeper. A greeting. Jacob smiled, tears stinging his eyes. "So that's your gift, huh?" The cub tilted its head, blinking curiously. The mother turned back toward the forest, tail flicking once. Before she disappeared into the trees, she looked back one last time. Jacob raised his hand in a small salute. "Go on now. The world's wide enough for both of us." She vanished into the woods, the cub trotting behind her. The sound of their footsteps faded, replaced by the song of crickets and wind through the grass. The sky burned gold, then dimmed to blue. Jacob stayed there a while, watching the horizon, until the first stars appeared. Then he whispered, almost to the night itself, "You were never my curse. You were my redemption." He turned back toward home, the farmhouse glowing warm against the dusk. Behind him, deep in the woods, a bobcat's cry echoed once, not of anger, not of pain, but of freedom.